Hi guys, Fragol Roc here, and welcome to the assembly video for the SNES RGB Bypass by Zaxor and Fragol Roc. So the first thing I'd like to do is get all of the documentation ready before we start the assembly. I'll have links to these down below, but essentially we have the bill of materials. This is where you'll find all of the designators, the values, and what packages goes where. And then the other thing that I like to get printed up and ready is sort of like this placemat. This placemat is what I use to organize all my components since they are really tiny and all look the same. I like to have them all on one space so I can just easily pull from them and then start assembling them. Okay, so the next part is to get that all ready and get the parts organized. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so in your kit you will have a few different things. You'll have the NES RGB board. You'll have the TH7374. All of the components needed to populate it, including some optional ones. And you'll also have the buddy board that can be used on the SNES Jr, so you don't have to worry about soldering to those tiny little vias. Alright, so let's go ahead and get this board organized, or all the parts organized. I'm just going to go through and put all of these in the appropriate spots. So here's the 1.2K, 470, so on and so forth. Alright, so please note that in the placemat there is a spot for 620 and 9.53K ohms. That's currently no longer used in this revision of the board. I'll make updates to this placemat so those aren't located there. Now you could also, at this point, remove all the components and leave them on the little placemats. For example, if you wanted to peel back the plastic here, so that your components are loose, and then put them onto the placemat, you can. You do run the risk of accidentally bumping them like I just did and spilling them all over the place, but that is up to you if you want to proceed like that. Alright, I think that's, oh, here's one more. There we go. So just gotta be careful if you're gonna take these out early, because if you do hit the paper or anything, they might go out. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's 5. All right, so next up we have the board itself. Go ahead and zoom in. So here's the board. We're going to go ahead and flux this up and start assembling it. Generally, when I am doing these boards, I like to start with the components towards the center and then work my way outwards. That way I'm not trying to navigate the soldering iron. It's not trying to navigate the soldering iron around all of the components that are already there. So I'll probably start with the TH7374. I'm going to skip the 5.1 million ohm resistors, which go over here, as those are optional. You don't need to install them for this mod to work. So I'm probably going to start with the TH7374 and then work with the ones on the inside and the outside and work my way out. So let's go ahead and get some flux. I'm just going to use some of this Amtech stuff since I already have it out. I'm just going to put it across the board, and then I'm going to use my little brush here to sort of move it around. There we go. All nice and fluxy. All right, let's go ahead and prep this 7374. Now the board does have little indicators on where you should align and orient your parts, so make sure you are paying attention to that. The 7374 does have a little dot on it, so if we were to zoom in there, you can see right now that dot is located down here in the lower left. And then on the board itself, there's a little dot here for the lower left. So just make sure that your 7374 is sitting on there properly in the right orientation. I'm going to just grab a little bit of flux or a little bit of solder just to sort of tack this into place, and then I will finish soldering the rest. Okay. Go ahead and zoom in, just check our work. Alright, no bridges that I can see. I'm not going to clean off the flux just yet because I'm going to be using that for the other pieces, but let's go ahead and keep assembling. So at this point I have up my mod assembly guide, and it's going to be a really good sort of visual reference of where I'm going to put everything. So I'm probably going to start with these capacitors here and the resistors over here, get those done, and then I'll work on doing this big line of them. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at R12 here. R12 is a 4.9K. Go ahead and open these up. Alright. Use a little bit of this blue tack to hold down my PCB so it's not going everywhere. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at this capacitor here, which is C1. C1 is a 1 microfarad, which is this guy right here. Let's go ahead and open it up. All right, next up I'm going to do this line of components. So starting at what is the camera's current top of the screen, or towards the top, is R11. R11 is going to be 75 ohms, then R10 is going to be 75 ohms, then C2 is a 0.1 microfarad, and then we have R6, 7, 8, and 9, which are going to be some 75 ohm resistors, and then a 470 ohm. So let's go ahead and get the 75 ohms I already have out. So R11. R10 is also 75 ohms. And then we have our C2, which is the 0.1 microfarad. Notice that I'm only soldering one side right now. That's just to hold them down, and then I'll go back through and do the other side. All right, so after C2 we have R6, which is our 470 ohm. You only have one of those, so make sure you don't accidentally put this in the wrong spot, or don't accidentally put a 75 ohm there. So there's the 470. And flip it over. There we go. Just a little bit of solder on the tip. Not enough solder on the tip, apparently. And then we have, after R6 is R7, R8, and R9, which are the rest of our 75 ohm resistors. So there's one of them. Sticky, sticky. All right, and now the last resistor. There we go. Now remember, these are only fluxed up on one side, or soldered in on one side, so let's go ahead and get the other side of those soldered in so we don't have anything loosey-goosey. See, that one wasn't quite on great, so let's go ahead and fix it. So now we have all of those installed. Sorry for the white balance issues there. So we've got those put on. Let's go ahead and just clean it up a little bit. Alright, so there's those components. Not super pretty because I'm kind of doing it live on camera, but they will do. That capacitor is a little tombstone, so I'll push that back down and fix it. Other than that, we're looking pretty good, and we can sort of wrap this up by doing the last few components over here on the left-hand side. So next we're going to go ahead and do the ones on the left-hand side here. So right here we have R4, R1, R2, and R5. R1, 2, and 3 are 1.2 kilo ohms, and then the R4 and 5 are the other 4.9s. So I'll just go ahead and put the 4.9s in since I already had that package opened up. So the 4.9s are going to be R5 and R4, which are located near the bottom. All right, so now we just have the 3 more resistors right there, and these are the 1.2K resistors for Rs 1, 2, and 3. I'm gonna go ahead and just make sure that these are all sitting flat. Alright, so all that's left is to do that last capacitor. That last big tantalum capacitor. That tantalum capacitor has a rating of 220 microfarads. There it is. So on the tantalum caps, there is a, try to show this, there is a colorful bar right there on the right side of the screen. That colorful bar indicates positive, and on the board there's a little white bar to the south of the mod there, and that's the positive side. So just make sure that you do have this in the proper orientation. The rest of the components on here, other than the THS 7374, all the other components don't have an orientation that you need to worry about. It's just this tantalum cap and the video amp. So make sure that you have those properly oriented before you solder them down. There we go. All right, and that should do it for our mod. So let me go ahead and clean it up, and then we'll get to installing it. All right, I mean, it's no easy bake oven method, but it can be hand soldered and assembled. Now let's go ahead and install this into an SNES Jr. All right, welcome to the SNES RGB installation portion of the video. So we have our freshly assembled SNES RGB Bypass mod. and our buddy board, so we don't have to worry about installing to the vias. And then I just have some, I have 4 strands of ribbon wire here that we'll use to do the installation. All right, so all you're going to do for this install is find the multi-out on the back of your SNES Jr, and you're going to place this mod board right on those pins there. It should just fit right on top there nicely. It avoids the capacitor legs on that side. It doesn't avoid these capacitor legs. So if you have a PAL region SNES Jr, you might have a capacitor here. So I encourage you to do a recap of the system before you install this, just so you have access to those capacitor legs. Because once this board is on, you won't have access to those capacitor legs. But if this is an NTSC or North American unit, then you don't have to worry about covering up those legs. Okay, so go ahead and just put your board there. I'm going to put in some flux here, and then I'm going to solder the board right on. Just make sure that it's laying as flat as possible before you start soldering in. And then that way you'll ensure that there isn't any movement around of the board that could possibly dislodge it or break something. All right, so I'm just going to put some solder in right there, just to sort of hold it in place. Wouldn't be a bad idea that after you solder this into place that you check it with a multimeter to make sure that you have a solid connection between all of the points. Alright, and while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin the sync red, green, and blue pads. Alright, there we go. Sitting nice and pretty. Next part is to install the buddy board. So the buddy board installs onto pin 10 in the middle. So it just sits right here. Right there. There might be a little bit of play depending on how your pins are situated, but I'm going to put just a little bit of solder here just to hold it into place to make sure that then the vias line up properly. So let's just go ahead and put some solder on there. That way I can adjust the board as needed so that the buddy board, hopefully you guys can see that, so that the buddy board lines up with those vias there. So there are 4 vias that we're interested in: sync, red, green, and blue, going from left to right there. And we want to make sure that these vias are lined up, in fact, with the little castellated holes of the buddy board. Now the buddy board is kind of tiny, so these castellated holes may still have burrs in it from the fabrication process. So just make sure that that's cleaned out and that you have those vias lined up nicely. And then all we're going to do, I'm going to add in some flux. I'm going to bring in my soldering iron with a little bit of solder on the tip. And I'm just going to make sure that these vias are soldered to these little castellated holes. And then go ahead and finish soldering the anchor points up top. And then I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin these pads as well to get ready for the wires. Okay. Next up is installing the wires. So I just have a little piece of 4-part ribbon cable here, so it has 4 wires attached to it. I'm going to go ahead and use these. We're going to strip it down and measure it out as well. I mean, you've got lots of room here to play with. It doesn't have to be like super tight, but you know, if you want to try to conserve some of your ribbon, you're more than welcome to take that into consideration. So I'm just going to do a simple bend in it. and snip it off there. And then I'll go ahead and pre-tin these as well. Alright, so let's go ahead and attach these wires to the kit first, the SNES RGB kit first. You can attach them in whatever order you want. I usually start from the top and work my way down. Put some more flux on there, get it ready. Sorry, I'm going to angle this up a little bit better. There we go, now I can see it much better. So we got our 1, 2, 3, 4 connections there. And now for the buddy board, all we're going to do, soldering iron down. All we're going to do is bend it at a right angle, and all of the lines should line up. So we've got sync on top here, which is the black, which is now sync over here, and everything should be lined up nicely. So let's go ahead, lay that in place. There we go. You have your SNES RGB Bypass installed, ready to go. Good measure to just sort of maybe clean it up a little bit. Use some isopropyl alcohol or some cleaners of some sort. I like to use IPA, 99%. And there we go. That's how you do the install with the buddy board and with the SNES RGB and S-Video. If you wanted to do the S-Video install, you'll use the Luma and Chroma pads here on the left side and then wrap it around to the encoder on the back there. You should be able to find pictures of that. If not, I'll put a link down in the description as well. All right, there you guys go. Hope you enjoy. Let me know if you have any questions.